Welcome back. Up to this point, we've learned about code just executing from top to bottom, just in a straight line. We've learned about conditionals where we can add an if statement and have it go one way, else go the other way. And then we also learned about if else and else if. So if, else if, else if, else. And then what if we wanted to do something like this? Something where we keep doing it over and over. And that's called looping. And that's what we're going to learn about in this video. And as you can see in our outline, JavaScript looping, we're going to go through all of these in this video. Let's get started. I have an empty script tag here that again is attached to our HTML. And let's start off with maybe a to-do list. And a to-do list has, well, it should be an array. And we want to have maybe clean room. We want to have brush teeth. Maybe exercise. We should definitely study some JavaScript. And finally, well, we should eat healthy. All right, so we have a to-do list. Let's say that we wanted to add an exclamation mark at the end of these to-do list items. I mean, these are all really important and we want to emphasize that. But I mean, that is kind of tedious, right? I have to go one by one and add an exclamation mark, and imagine if to-do list was hundreds of lines. And as programmers, we want to do things efficiently. That's what we have machines for. So let's add some looping to this. To do a loop in JavaScript, one of the main ways you can do it is called a for loop. And you're going to learn a new syntax here, and be warned, it looks confusing at first, but it's one of those things, again, you have to do it a few times and you'll get the hang of it. So the first one is variable I equals 0. We'll do I is less than todos.length, and then we'll do I plus plus. Don't worry, I'll explain what this means. We have the curly brackets, and then within here, for now, let's just wait and explain what's happening. So I'm saying for, which is a JavaScript word, is saying we're going to do a loop. Now in this loop, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say I equals 0. So it's just a random variable. It's common to be used in a for loop, stands for an index. So I starts off with a 0. We have a semicolon, which means that's the end of the expression. We just assigned the I variable, the 0. And then in the next line, it says I, which is at the moment 0, if that is less than the to-do's length. And to-do's length, we've never seen this before, but it's saying how long is the list. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 0 is greater than 5. If that's the case, then run this loop. And then when you're done, do I plus plus, which means I plus 1. So let's go through that. First off, todos.length. If I copy this and I do todos.length, I get 5 items. I could also do hello.length and I get 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So length just tells us how many items in the list. And if I do variable I equals 0, well, I is 0. But if I do I plus plus, and I look at I again, I see that it's 1. If I do I plus plus again, well, I get 2. So this is incrementing I. So what we're doing is we're saying start off with 0. As long as I is less than 5, then run whatever in this block. And once you're done with it, add 1 to I. So let's see what happens if I do console.log I here. Let's save and refresh. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're doing a loop where it starts off with 0, then we add 1, it's now 1. Then we add another one to 2, another one to 3, and another one to 4. And how come we don't have 5 here? Because as soon as I equals 5, that's going to match the to-do's length, and the loop stops. So that's how we tell the loop to stop. Okay, so how can we do this? If we wanted to add exclamation mark on the end of these, well, we can access to-dos by, because it's an array, by I. Because the first go around, I will be 0, which will be clean room, then 1, which is brush teeth, then 2, which is exercise, 3, which is study JavaScript, and 4, which is eat healthy. So let's double check that. If I do to-dos I and save, refresh, and I should change this back to I. There you go. Otherwise, if I do this, this actually won't run. Watch this. Because, well, this is 5 equals 5, so it's never gonna go through the loop. So let's change that back to I and refresh. Clean room, brush teeth, exercise, study JavaScript, eat healthy. Perfect. So now I can just do I plus exclamation mark. Let's refresh. Look at that. That's how important these items are. But if I do to-do or to-dos, well, my to-dos don't actually have these exclamation marks. We've just console logged them, but we haven't actually changed the to-do array. So let's do that. We can now say that to-dos I equals to-dos I plus exclamation mark. So let's see. I refresh, nothing happens, but now if I check to-dos, look at that. I have exclamation marks in each of my to-dos. And again, to break that down, we're saying clean room now equals clean room plus exclamation mark. Very cool. Okay, let's learn a few others. Actually, before we do, what if we want to cross these off the list? Maybe we want to cross them off because we've done them. Well, we can do something like todos.pop. If you remember, that's an array method, pop, that removes the last item. So if I go save and refresh, I get todos I pop is not a function. Why is that? Well, because we're saying clean room pop, and that's a string. What we want to do is todos.pop, because that's the array. So if I save and refresh that, let's see what we have in our to-dos. Clean room and brush teeth. Why is that? Well, because initially this was 0 and to-do list length was 5. But then because we popped it, this changed to 4 and this to 1. And then 3 and 2. So as you can see, we removed eat healthy, study JavaScript, and exercise, but because our to-do's length changed, well, it stopped halfway through. So what's one way that we can fix that issue? Well, we can do variable todos.length, todos length equals todos.length. So now this variable is 5. So if I just do the variable todos length, this is going to remember, because it's only going to run once. This is going to run, then we're going to assign 5 to todos length, and then this is going to loop over. So if I save this and refresh, let's look at to-dos. Look at that. We finished all of our to-dos. Very cool. Okay, let me show you another option, which is the while loop. The while loop goes something like this. While, let's create a variable here. Variable counter 1. We're going to say that that is 0. And we're going to say while counter 1 is less than 10, in that case, I want to console log counter 1. And then I want to counter 1 plus plus. Remember, we're adding. So every time we're increasing counter by 1. Let's just see what happens here if I save this. And refresh. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it stops because, well, as soon as this hits 10, this is no longer right, so this part of the block doesn't run. Okay, can I do something maybe the other way around, where we say that the counter is 10, and this time we want to count down. So while the counter is 10, keep going, and otherwise, stop. And the way we do that, we obviously want to subtract. We don't want to keep going 11 or 12, because otherwise it's going to keep going forever. The way we do that is minus minus, which is the exact opposite. So it subtracts 1. Let's see what happens. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. Now, out of curiosity, what will happen if I go like this, where the number just keeps increasing from 10 to 11 to, well, infinity, right? It's just going to keep going up. And you can do this in Google Chrome if you want. It's actually pretty entertaining. What happens is it just keeps going forever and ever. You'll just get a list of all these things, and it's called an infinite loop. An infinite loop means it pretty much goes infinitely, except it doesn't really, because eventually Google Chrome is going to crash. It's going to say, okay, I can't handle all this information. You're driving me crazy, and it's going to stop working. Okay, so we learned the for loop. We learned the while. What else do we have? We have the do. So this is called the do while loop. And it's a little bit different than the while. We start off with do, then curly brackets, and we say counter, let's call it counter 2 this time. We'll do variable counter 2 equals 10. And do counter 2 plus plus, so add counter 2, and also console.log counter 2. And we want to move console log at the top, because this way it'll start with 10, then increase, oops, this should be subtracted. So we do 10, it's going to log 10, then it's going to subtract. So the next time it comes around here, it's going to be 9. And then we do while, and we give a condition here. So the condition is going to be counter 2 is going to be greater than 0. Okay, so let's see what happens here. I refresh. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It looks like we just did the same thing as the while loop, didn't we? So let me just test that out. Let's refresh here. And we see that we have 10 through 1 for the while loop and 10 through 1 through the do while loop. So what is the difference here? The difference is that with a while loop, we check the condition first. So we say, is counter 1 greater than 0? Okay, then do the stuff. Versus the do while loop that says, do the stuff first and then do counter 2. Let me just demonstrate that point. if we do 10 here and 10, let's refresh. I only get 1. Let's check something here. I'm going to say this is the while loop, and this is the do while loop. Save and refresh. So it looks like the do while ran, but the while loop never did because, well, 10 equals to 10, this fails, and the loop doesn't run. Versus the do while loop that does this first and then checks the condition if they should loop. So that's the difference between these two. But to be honest with you, most of the time, you're going to be using a for loop. And the for loop is what you're going to get used to. But there's actually a better way of doing it. If you look at the section outline, we see that I have one last one, which is for each, and it says new in ECMAScript 5. So as you remember, JavaScript is constantly evolving, and ECMAScript 5 was a new standard that added the for each method. So what is the for each method? Well, I'm going to show you the difference between a for loop and a for each. They both do the same thing, but tell me which one looks better. So with here, we'll say console.log I. So we're just logging the I. And with a for each loop, I can do to-dos dot for each function I console.log I. Might look a little bit confusing, but let's just try it out. Let's see what happens. So it looks like line 10 is printing out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and line 14 is printing out clean room, brush teeth, exercise, study, JavaScript, eat healthy. What are we doing here? Well, the for each, it takes an array, in this case the to-dos, and it asks for an argument that is, tell me what to do with it. So the action that we want to perform on the to-dos can be represented in a function. So I say function, and this function receives the argument of I, which is the each individual item in the to-dos. So I could just say to-do here, and to-do. And refresh it, it'll still be the exact same. So you see here that we're not necessarily accessing the index like we are with this one. Because here, in order to get the to-dos, I had to do to-dos square bracket I. If I refresh, okay, in that case, now it's all the same. Okay, but how do I access the index within the for each? Well, the second parameter and the second argument that it receives is the I, the index. So now if I do I and refresh, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the same thing as doing this in the for loop. And refresh, and look at that. Now, by looking at these two, which one tells you more about what it does? This one or this one? Let's read it in English. To-dos for each run a function that console logs the to-do and the index. Versus, well, frankly, this looks confusing. So for each is a really, really great method that they've added to the language that really simplifies things. Most people might get confused by this part, the function. But just to show you how powerful for each is, we can actually do this. I'm going to take out the function and I'm going to call it log to-dos. And now all I have to do is have a function and call it log to-dos. And now I'm going to comment this out. It's going to do the exact same thing. But I can now use log to-dos in other places. So I can now do, let's say, I have another list that has maybe exclamation marks, like we did in the first one. To-dos, important. So now I can do to-dos important for each and use the same function, log to-dos. I save and refresh, and look at that. We have these to-dos as well. So you can see that it's very extensible. Now the one caveat I want to show you with for each is that it's a new standard. As we do with all new standards, we should check that they work on all browsers. So if you remember, we had caniuse.com that we use for this. And we used it at CSS to make sure that our CSS3 features like box shadow and transitions work on all the browsers. So let's do that. Let's do for each. And you see here, ECMAScript 5, for each. It looks like, well, full support. Everything looks good. We just have Opera Mini that has partial support. So it looks pretty good. Unless we're really worried about Opera Mini, we can use for each in the browser. And just to test, if we open up our console, well, we can definitely see that an array has for each. So there you have it. We had the for loop, the while loop, the do while loop, and then finally for each. In the next video, we're going to expand on our Facebook example and have multiple users so that we can loop through the database of multiple users and see if the username and password match any of those. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.